Howdy, Joseph here again. Can you tell? Today's musical selection is Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, disc 1 of their complete works collection. Again, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Actually, this is just Crosby, Stills and Nash. I used to say Crosby, Stills and Nash and sometimes Young. And there's some great anecdotes about CSN and sometimes why. One was that Neil Young evidently had difficulty showing up for practice sessions. He'd be gone for months. And when he finally got back, he'd say, "Hey, look at all this great music." And they'd say, "Yeah, it's great, but where the hell have you been?" So that's why he doesn't appear on a lot. Evidently, there was also some friction between Stephen Stills and Neil Young. Creatives, what can I tell you? Anyway, picking up where we left off, I want to go more on closings. And the reason I want to go more on closings is a lot of people that I talk with don't realize exactly how a story is structured, number one. And number two, that each chapter, each section, each scene has to have its own closing. And that has to lead to the next thing. Let me show you a picture. Let me see if I can get the picture. And I'm going to show you this picture. I'm going to embed it in the video, so bear with me. This is going to be really exciting. I want to look at it while I'm talking with you. Okay, so here we have this wonderful image. And here's your basic story structure, very basic. Beginning goes up, then there's something, and it comes down. Middle comes down to the end. You start at the beginning, you build the tension, you build the tension, you build the tension until the crisis point. That's the middle of the story in this simplified version. And then everything comes down. There's something solved. There's some kind of a denouement from that crisis, and the hero or heroine wins. Whatever, the protagonist is victorious, and all the tension is gone. The reader goes, okay, thank goodness. Wonderful in a short story. And I think this applies to every form, including Flash, but we can get into that at some other point. Now, let's expand this to a novel where you have chapters, where you have scenes, okay? And now I'm going to show you another image. Excuse me. Now what we have here is the very same structure, but we have that structure applied to every individual chapter, scene, whatever. It can even go to the paragraph level. And the other thing that's interesting about it is we have the beginning, we go up to the crisis of the scene, chapter, whatever, and then we go down. We have it solved. Okay, good. But we don't go all the way back down to the bottom level of tension. We don't do that full release. We give a hint. We do a leap. We point to what's coming. It may not be in the next chapter, but it's got to be somewhere in the book, in the novel. And then we do another climb. Oh my God, things are escalating again. Oh no, okay, we got to the crisis. We've solved that one. A little bit of relaxation. Oh, but wait a minute. We're not getting done all the way yet. We're not back down to ground level. We're still escalating. Not escalating. We're notching. You know, like Chef Emerald used to say, let's kick it up a notch. That's what you're doing here. We're kicking it up a notch until you get to the final chapter or scene where you have a long climb up. And that long climb's got to be difficult. And it's got to be, oh my, it's got to be work. Okay. Then you have that final climax where it's done. Sauron is defeated. That type of thing. And then you have that going down all the way. Now you'll notice in here, We have the red line until there's a little bit of green at the very end. The green can come in anywhere you want because that green line signifies the wrap up. We're done. Somebody says, yes, okay, the Death Star is gone. That's what happens. You need to have that final bit of closure, unless you're doing a series, in which case you still need that little bit of closure. But now you also need to point, just as you did with the chapters and scenes. You need to point to the next book in the series. This book has to have closure. The next book has to have something else. I'm going to give you some examples. In the 2016 version of Empty Sky, the first chapter, which is entitled The Moon, remember we changed it, is Jamie's father is having difficulty, can't wake up. Jamie's panicking, picks up his dad's cell phone. Then he calls his dad's best friend, Uncle Jack, and talks to Jack's nurse, because Jack's a neurophysiologist. And she stayed on the phone with him, calmly talking to him, listening to him, and asking simple questions of him until he heard the helicopter overhead. Okay, all well and good, fine, nifty. In the 2023 version, the big version, okay, remember that we rewrote. The first chapter is now called The Cabin, and it begins with Jamie, not with the moon. We also, in the rewrite of the first chapter, introduced two other characters, three really, but basically two other characters are necessary to the through line of the book. And those two other characters are Tom and Ellie, Jamie's mom and dad, or dad and mom. You're going to be careful when you do that sex switching in with your characters. So anyway, now in the new chapter 1, Jamie's a toddler. And it's the first incident of, yes, the moon playing a role in his life, but it is Ellie who discovers it because she's going to play a critical role at the climax. And she thinks Shem and Jamie have been taken away. Shem is the dog. Ellie woke, the covers clenched in her hand. She looked across the cabin and saw Jamie and Shem sleeping together as always in their bed. She let out a breath and shook her head. It was a dream. The full moon's light came in through a cabin window. It must have disturbed her, woken her, worried her in her sleep. She rolled over, away from Tom, to give him a little more room. Dew-laden, toddler-sized footprints and paw prints made a path across the floor from the cabin's door to Jamie and Shem's bed. She sat up as the cabin door closed. The 2016 ending was okay. It was adequate. We're going to wait for the helicopter to show up and do something. The 2023 version, in my estimation, is better because now we imposed, we don't know what. Is this a threat? Is Jamie in danger? What did Ellie actually witness? Was Tom actually aware of this? Did she actually wake him up? Which is earlier in that chapter. So the new version, she sat up as the cabin door closed, hints that there's something going on here beyond what they're aware of, that it's pointing towards the rest of the novel. Okay, very good. In another novel that I've written, because I've written quite a few, and you should have them all, The Augmented Man. The first chapter, which is basically, it's when the main character Trailer comes out of hiding. He basically destroys a bar. Trailer's eyes closed and he's being attacked. Trailer's eyes closed and his face relaxed, becoming calm, pacific, the face of a child fallen asleep. He brought his head down hard onto Eddie's skull and smiled at the sharp sounding crack. That to me is a good closing because it's in four paragraphs at the very end of this chapter. I escalate, my God, Trailer is a frickin' weird dude, okay? It starts out with him being able to analyze people by heartbeat. The sounds of, he can hear the sounds of their heartbeat. He catalogs the weaponry these individuals who are attacking him are carrying. He determines who they are by how they move, what their knowledge of combat is, what their knowledge of fighting experience is. And then finally, before Eddie's thought became action, he can determine what people are thinking. Trailer's spine released and he grew. So I'm escalating to that close, which is, excuse me, for the reader. Okay, Nick Trailer is a weird dude. How weird is he? And that's the rest of the book. Okay. So in a nutshell, what we've done, let me go back to seeing myself in the camera because it's such a nice thing. Hi there. Here I am again. One of the things that we do is we keep on notching up until we get to that final thing. Now I'm going to give you a spoiler here. The original ending to the Augmented Man was that kind of green closure, which I mentioned earlier. And in the last round of editing before publication, I realized, wow, if I take off this very last chapter, the book has a closing, but it also points to a sequel. And yes, that sequel is in the works. But here's how, let me go back there. Here's how it ends now. Trailer's wife, Karen, has been killed by friendly fire. And she's been medevaced out, but she doesn't make it. He smiles so quietly, doesn't he? So there's a place where the last battle, if you will, takes place, where Nick attempts to save her. I'm sorry. I know what's coming in the sequel. It's dang good, I hope. They're now flying. Trailer and Donaldson are now flying in a combat helicopter. Trailer jumped up before the war cloud landed. He knelt where he'd last held Karen and raised his fist, bringing it down slowly to the ground, then faster and harder, banging a hole into the earth. He spoke quietly at first. His voice grew louder and louder until it matched his victory yell at its greatest. I held you, Karen. I held you just like you wanted. I held you. The hole became a puddle filled with Nick's tears as Donaldson watched. Nick whispered, "You were the only person to ever love me," his eyes fixed on the puddle. A few sobs later, Donaldson joined him. So instead of the clean close that the novel originally had, it now has Nick and Donaldson, the two main players in the story, basically in pain, unresolved pain, undenewed pain at the loss of the one woman who ever loved Nick, who Donaldson also recognized was a good person. Whenever you have the ability to point to the next piece, make sure the book itself, story is closed, but point, if you can. That's good closure. Thank you. And in this post, by the way, you'll see that there's a lot more experiments and writing coming because I need to figure out, do I really know this stuff? And once again, he looks for the stop record button. Oh, there it is. Bye-bye.